became very, very rich from that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true.
I don't think so either. No. He only made a few thousand.
I think he was a geology engineer or civil engineer stuff. I think he studied geology at Stanford. That's where he met his wife. That's why we're studying that.
That's why the only thing that he has done of note is recognize or make the Star Spangled Banner the official national anthem.
And he built a dam, apparently.
Well, no, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
He had one named after him, though.
Oh, it's just as good. You get all the glory with no other work.
That's true.
You want to do This Day in History?
Of course,
it's very historic.
It's a good one.
Yeah, This Day in History, November 19th, 1863.
Ooh, I know what happened on this day.
At the dedication of a military cemetery at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, during the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln delivers one of the most memorable speeches in American history. It's just 272 words.
Yeah.
People were disappointed at how short it was.
Yeah, I wouldn't be.
Lincoln brilliantly and movingly reminded a war-weary public why the Union had to fight and win the Civil War. And we have a recording.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it. I want to give credit.
This is Abraham Lincoln.
No, this is not Abraham Lincoln. It's Britton Rhea who recorded and did the recording. So,
you ready?
Sure. No. Dang it. That's not Lincoln.
That's not it.
Although he had a high voice, they said.
That's Obama.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Inspiring words.
Inspiring, but very ironic. Do you know what's ironic about that entire speech? Is right in the middle of it, he says, "The world will little note nor remember what we say here."
Right.
And here we are, how many years?
25, 30 years?
25 or at least 30 years later,
yep.
Playing it on the best internet talk show that we host.
In the history of our lives.
Sure. I think that's true.
What?
I think we do. We do all right.
Nobody cares.
Okay. Hey, some more history. You want to move on then and talk about Thanksgiving? Because
Thanksgiving's come up, and we know that what happened in the first Thanksgiving was that the Pilgrims and the Indians came together in a day of feasting and thanking the whoever they believed in for their bounty and all that they had.
Well,
it was peaceful and it was loving, and they had turkey.
Yeah.
And oysters.
That's actually that's partially true, right? Because they did, the Pilgrims and the Native Americans, they did come together for a feast.
But it was a hunting
There was
party.
a hunting party. They did pretty good. They had a feast. What actually happened, right, is they colonized. They had this little group of things. They were communists. It was commonly owned land. Everything that was produced on that land was commonly owned, right? So if you worked hard and you grew corn, you got a bunch of corn, your reward is you get to share that corn with everybody.
Right.
And what happens in every situation where there's communism is people say, gee, I'm working awfully hard, but I'm not getting any more out of it. So why would I work hard?
Why do I have to work hard?
Why would I do this? And so what happens is people stop working hard, and you don't have as much corn.
They went
right?
hungry.
And then you start to starve, and people actually die, which actually happened, right? People starved. They had a horrible year. The governor thought, this might not be a good idea.
This isn't working.
I'm not going to completely get rid of my whole socialist communist thing. Mm-hmm. The land is still commonly owned.
Yep.
But what I'm going to do, I'm going to assign a plot of land to each person, family, whatever.
Based on the size of their family. So the big family's got a little bit more.
Sure.
But it was still owned by the government.
It was.
But
which is
you were responsible for your own parcel.
The idea of land ownership and use rights was not very prevalent at this time, right? I mean, that's owning your own plot of land is relatively recent.
Right. Yeah.
I'm okay with it, but it is relatively a relatively new concept. Anyway, he assigned some land to each person and said, you're responsible for that land, but here's the cool thing. You get to keep everything that you produce on that land. It's yours. You own that.
And if you want to sell it to your neighbor who doesn't have a lot or trade for other goods, you can do that.
You can barter. This is weird. It's like sort of like free enterprise capitalism, sort of.
Ooh.
Right? Yeah, horrible. Well, see, what happened is they got a lot of corn. They had a lot of food,
and everybody ate.
Things
well.
did well. Mm-hmm. Everybody ate pretty well. They had a rough winter or a rough summer one time, a nice drought, but then it rained. They did okay.
And the governor said, "Wow, this is working out pretty good now.
This is working out pretty good.
We should have a day.
Let's have a day of thanks."
Yes.
Right. In 1623. Right, and this is actually written down. This is really written down history. Right,
he wrote this down. November 29th, actually.
Yeah,
so it was late.
It was a Thursday,
as it always is. How did they?
It was
know?
the last Thursday of November. It's weird. Yeah, I don't know. He said, "Hey, this is the day of thanks. This is Thanksgiving Day."
But this was like 2 or 3 years after the
hunting
party.
It was. Right. There's other stories too that were talking about like 1637 and all the stuff that happened well after this, right? Because you have the two stories. You have the Indians saved the Pilgrims, and then you have the Pilgrims went out, murdered a whole bunch of Indians, came back and celebrated. Those are like the two stories that you hear. The second one isn't always taught in schools. The first one usually is taught in schools, where the Indians brought corn, and that's what saved the Pilgrims, and so they feasted together, right? That's not where that may have happened.
And they did have oysters.
But that is not where, and succotash. Lots of succotash.
I don't know if they had succotash.
Yes, they did.
Did they have succotash?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Why wouldn't they?
I don't know.
It was very prevalent in Massachusetts at the time.
I like succa. I like beans and corn and stuff.
Beans and corn are good. So it's just another little piece of history that actually teaches a great message, right? But it's not generally what we're teaching to our children in schools.
No, actually, we're teaching that capitalism is evil.
Yeah,
and you should be embarrassed by your success and wealth.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And that you owe it to people that weren't as successful.
Which reminds me, did you watch the Novito interview with the girl from the Million Student March for Free Education?
Neil Cavuto?
Yeah, Neil Cavuto.
You combine his names.
Cavuto?
Neil Cavuto.
Anyway,
what about it?
Did you watch that?
With
the dumbest college student in the history of the world.
Maybe.
And then she lies and says that, she came from a poor working class family and her family had a struggle to put her through college.
Was that her? Was that true for her? I know one of the leaders.
I thought it was her. Yeah,
one of the
her
men.
picture was.
Okay.
No, that was the black protester that was starving. His dad makes $8 million a year.
Yeah, right.
Her dad only makes like $5 million a year.
Oh, we'll see.
And she goes to
that's the level of struggle that the Clintons had.
Right.
Hillary,
right after got out of the White House. They were flat
they were very,
broke.
very poor. She was only making $5 million a month with her book, and
Speeches.
he was his speeches or her speech, both of them.
$250,000 a speech or whatever. Why would you?
I would love
why
to be
would
that
you
poor.
lie or tell that story anywhere, let alone on a national TV station, and not expect that to come back in your face?
She's not very smart.
Are they that delusional?
Yes, I think so.
Gosh,
I think
just
so.
can't- I can't. And she was so dumb, She was willing to, tax them 100%. When what happens when you tax the rich at 100%? They're no longer rich.
Right.
So you're killing the goose that's laying the eggs, and they don't seem to understand that.
Yeah, except you don't get much meat from the goose in this case.
Well, you stop the golden eggs. If you
Yeah.
if you tax them only 70%, then you get the golden eggs, and the goose is still alive. But then the goose says, "Screw it, I'm not going to work anymore." And we get back to your Thanksgiving,
Yep.
where they don't want to work hard because
Yeah.
they're not getting anything.
Well,
out of
maybe
it.
if we taught the story.
And she foolishly said, "Oh, they'd be willing to do it." And that's when he came in and said, "Well, your friends want to be successful, right? Or you think they're going to be happy when the day they announce it? Yay, I'm at the point where I give 90% of my money in taxes. I've made it."
I mean, yeah, are you kidding me that they'd be willing to? Warren Buffett complains all the time that he's rich and he's willing to give his fair share, but he never volunteers his fair share.
Yeah,
In fact, he does the opposite. He hires a bunch of lawyers to fight the IRS because he thinks he's overpaying in taxes. Come on.
yeah.
They're not willing to because they're not stupid. You don't get rich by giving your money away to everybody else that doesn't work. It's just not how it's not how it happens.
God, she was dumb. My brother and I watched that, and we were just like, our mouths went open. It was like, this can't be real. This has got to be a satire. It was The Onion, but it wasn't.
It certainly wasn't. No.
God.
Fox News, which is slightly more reliable than The Onion.
Although The Onion gets it right pretty often.
But it is true. And then a lot of times you can look back at some of their older articles. It's like
Satire, you're
1984. Like, whoa. They thought this was absurd when they wrote it. And it's
really,
happening.
It's really real. So where were we?
I don't know. Let's talk about refugees. What do you think?
That, and I want to talk about civil asset forfeitures.
Yeah,
for
of course
sure.
we do.
All right. So, feel like a refugee. Oh, I have to have a copyright to sing that, right?
I don't know. You're the one that told me you can do something and just keep it or something. I don't remember what you said.
You just
Didn't
rip
make sense.
anybody off and use their stuff.
It was something like that.
I did. I actually produced an album.
Did you?
Yeah, and I just copied.
Called the White Album?
I just copied a Ted Nugent album
Oh.
verbatim, and I put it out as my own.
Yeah.
I mean, why not, right?
Yeah.
It's not like
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why not.
It's not like
There's a
he's
lot of
selling a lot of
reasons.
records.
That's actually true.
That's actually true.
It's too bad. But he has sold a lot of
He
records.
has in the
He has
past.
sold a lot of records. He has some guns, too.
I've sold 3.
Yeah.
That's when I heard from his
Yeah.
lawyer.
Okay, what?
It's amazing, those cease and desist letters.
So I feel like you're dodging the question.
I don't want to talk about refugees.
You don't?
Sure, let's talk about them.
Okay.
I feel sorry for them.
Okay. Do we owe it to anybody to bring them into this country?
We don't owe anything to anyone.
Okay.
Now, having said that, what would Jesus do? What would a moral country do? What should a wealthy country that has the means to take care of people,
Okay.
what should they do?
I mean,
Those
should
are the
do,
questions
They
we
should
should
do
have.
whatever's best for their country,
Now,
right?
they talk about
but I don't
vetting.
know. I don't know which
I wanna-
wealthy country you're talking about. The one that's $19 trillion in debt? Is
Yeah,
that
we're
the
like-
wealthy country that
yeah,
you're talking about?
We're like the best one.
Yeah. Well, we are the best one. I completely agree with that.
Now, the
But
vetting.
you're
I just
talking
want
about wealthy. We don't have money for this,
we
right?
can
Regardless of the terrorism.
We can print it. The the Federal Reserve just has to.
But that's not even what's happening, right? What they're doing is they're going to reach into your pocket and my pocket and take out some money
As long as they
so
print-
they can feed these people.
As long as they print more.
But they're not going to give it to you when they print it.
No, they give it
if
to
they
the
were
refugees.
printing it and giving it to me, I would let them print it all day long.
If
That's
they
fine.
give it to the refugees, then they're not taking it from us. So what's the harm?
other than deflation, but
We just
right.
do a couple
Or
$1 trillion.
inflation. What? Deflation.
We could have like $100,000 bills.
So don't you remember when we talked about that? The
Yeah.
$1 trillion or what was it? At the time it was like the
Zimbabwe or
$15 trillion coin.